All right, let's dive into one of the most talked about, most controversial books out there, The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Look, this thing is more than just a book. It's basically a modern-day handbook on power, pulling lessons from centuries of history to show you the timeless and, yeah, often pretty ruthless ways people get power and hang on to it.
Wow. Okay. So, right out of the gate, the book sets a tone that is, let's just say, chillingly practical. And this quote, it gets right to the heart of it. Power isn't really about who's strongest. It's a game of pure strategy, where the moves that really count are the ones nobody ever sees coming. And this leads us to the book's biggest, most central idea. You can't just decide not to play the game of power. It argues that whether you know it or not, you're already on the board. So the only choice you really have isn't if you're going to play, it's how well you're going to learn the rules. So let's get into those rules. First up is a big one, and it's totally counterintuitive. It's all about how you handle the people above you. And trust me, getting this one wrong is a recipe for disaster. Okay, law number 1. It sounds pretty straightforward, but it goes against every instinct we have to, show off and impress people with our skills. Greenie's warning is clear. When you shine too brightly, you don't make your boss admire you. You make them feel insecure and threatened. And that's about the last thing you want. I mean, just look at the story of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister for King Louis XIV. This guy throws a massive, incredible party to honor the king. The problem? It was too good. The king looked around and saw a palace grander than his own and a host who was more popular than he was. The very next day, Fouquet was thrown in prison where he stayed for the rest of his life. His big mistake? He outshone the master.
So the lesson here is pretty simple, right? Your success is directly linked to how secure the people above you feel. If you could make your bosses look smarter, better, more brilliant, you become an indispensable ally they can't afford to lose. Now that is a position of real power. Now, let's move on, because this next one builds on that idea. It's about a different kind of power, one that exists completely outside of what you do. It's about what people think of you, your reputation, and you have to guard it with your life.
So here we are at law number 5. Your reputation is this invisible force that walks into a room before you do. If it's strong, it can win you battles without you ever having to lift a finger. But the second it gets tarnished, you're open to attacks from every single angle. It's your armor. This is a perfect example of how our judgment just totally depends on reputation. There's this old fable where powerful animals like a tiger and a bear confess to these horrible crimes, and everyone praises them. But then the poor, humble donkey admits he ate a tiny scrap of grass, and everyone loses their minds and blames him for everything. The moral of the story is crystal clear. What people think of you totally colors how they see your actions. The actual facts, they barely matter compared to the perception. Which means you can't just sit back and let your reputation happen. You have to be constantly building and shaping it yourself. And all this talk about shaping perceptions brings us to maybe the most controversial part of the book, the art of deception. According to Greene, real power means you have to master appearances and learn how to hide what you're really up to until the perfect moment to strike. The philosophy here is that you've got to be adaptable, almost like an actor changing roles. See, if you're always predictable, you're easy to counter. But if you can change your mask to fit the situation, hiding your real plans and feelings, you become totally unreadable. And it's pretty hard to fight something you can't even read. The book is full of these great images to explain the idea. A fox in sheep's clothing can just waltz right past the guards. And it all connects to this great quote, which says you should only show your hand after you've already won. The real victory happens in secret, long before the war is ever declared. So if you were a little uncomfortable with all that talk about deception, well, buckle up, because this next part asks you to rethink the most personal things in your life, your friends and your enemies, and to start seeing them as strategic pieces on a board. Law number 2 is a real shock to the system. The book basically argues that friends are a liability. Why? Because being close to them makes them envious and resentful. But an old enemy? They have something to prove. If you bring them onto your team, they'll often work harder and be more loyal than a friend ever would.
Just look at how different these two views are. Everything we're taught tells us to trust our friends, be open, be independent. The laws of power say the exact opposite.
watch your friends, hide your plans, and, get this, make other people dependent on you. So in this world, power isn't about being free, it's about being essential. And to really hammer home this cold, hard approach, Greene brings in the master himself, Machiavelli. The logic is brutal, but it's simple. If you have to move against an opponent, you have to do it so completely that they can never, ever recover. Why? Because someone you've only wounded a little will spend the rest of their life trying to get revenge.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together with the book's final, ultimate point. You might be listening to all of this and thinking, you know what, this is not for me. I'm just going to sit this game out. Well, according to Greene, that's the biggest illusion there is.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The book claims that even trying not to have power is a power move. You know, the people who act all innocent or morally superior, they are often playing the most sophisticated game of all, using that apparent weakness to get exactly what they want.
The conclusion you're supposed to draw is that there's no way out. There's no safe zone where power dynamics just disappear. Every single thing we do is some kind of negotiation. By pretending you're not part of it, you're not opting out. You're just making yourself an easy target for everyone who knows how the game is played.
And that brings us to the final big question. The point of all this isn't necessarily to tell you to go out and be a ruthless manipulator. It's about opening your eyes to the way human beings actually operate. The 48 Laws are just a description of the game as it's been played for thousands of years. So the only real question left is, now that you know the rules, how are you going to play?